Hey there, this is Elena with Black Sheep 303 Creative, and my project today is a very pretty wreath card using the Garden Notes Peony and Dogwood 2 dies along with the Grapevine Wreath die that you see there. So I've die cut the Grapevine Wreath from some Elizabeth Craft Designs dark chocolate soft finish cardstock, and all the dies are from Elizabeth Craft Designs as well. And now I'm taking my ground espresso distress ink and my blender tool, and I'm just kind of smudging it all over the wreath, sort of randomly, to give it a little bit of extra dimension and some shading here and there. Now the base for my piece is a white soft finish cardstock piece that's cut to 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. The purple piece is 5 1/2 by 5 1/2. That is from the Moda Scrap Happy Travel pattern paperback. And then I'm taking my Grapevine Wreath, using my Zig 2A glue pen all over the back of it, and I'm going to adhere that down on the middle of the card front, and that will be the base on which I will build my flowers. So the first flower is the Peony. That's the die set there on the right. I have cut the leaves and 2 stems, so I think I've got 3 sets of leaves and 2 stems. And now I'm taking my Distress Blender and some Forest Moss ink, and I'm going around the edges of the leaves, no fancy anything happening, just kind of randomly smudging it on the edges. And this is Olive Twist soft finish cardstock that I've used for these pieces to cut them out, and that adds a little bit of shading and very, very nice dimension. So to kind of shape these, this is the leaf pad, and then this is the leaf tool, and I've flipped the stem over, and I'm drawing a line down the center of the 2 stems to give it a little bit of subtle dimension. A little tricky because they're super skinny, but you can do it. It's not too hard. And you use the sort of the U side of the leaf tool as opposed to the pointy sharp end, just so you don't scratch the back of the leaf. And then on the leaf, again on the back, flipped over, I'm drawing a line from the center, from the top down to the center. And on the double leaf, I did it in the center of each leaf and kind of connected them at the base. And then you flip it back over. And then I'm going to grab my PanPastels here. This is the Susan's Gardens PanPastels set number 1. Very bright colors and really pretty. And I'm going to bend the leaf back. So it's right side up. I'm bending it back along that scored line that I just added to the back. And I'm going to highlight that stem with the bright green in this PanPastel kit. And again, adds a really nice subtle shading, really kind of cool. Really adds to the sort of realistic look of the flowers in the end. And then I'm doing the same thing on the stem. It's a little tricky to bend those, but it can be done. And now I'm just going to add the veins on either side of the leaf, kind of like in a diagonal on either side of that scored line, I guess, or the main vein, to add additional realism to these little leaves, and it makes a huge difference. I don't know if you can see it in the video. I hope you can. And so then to shape them, I'm going to pinch it in the center with the tweezers, or hold it in the center with the tweezers. And then I'm going to pinch it like in half up like this. And then I'm going to take the molding mat, which is the black mat, and my medium ball stylus, which is also in the toolkit, and just kind of rub on the back to shape the leaf backwards. So you can see how like it's kind of pinched up in the center and then it folds away from itself on the back, much like real leaves do, just by kind of pushing on the back of it with this ball stylus. And I do that for all the leaves. Now these are the petals for the flower. So this is the base, the petal base I'm going to call it, and then those are the rest of the petals. I die cut out the petal die 3 times to have enough petals to complete this. And this is out of Perfect Pink soft finish cardstock. And so then to add some, again, like realism and dimension to the color, I'm taking the fuchsia color from the PanPastel kit, and I'm coloring sort of in the lower middle of each petal. And I'm going to do that on all the petals. And there are a bunch of different shapes and sizes of the petals, which is what makes it look really realistic once you put it all together. But the way to tell what's the bottom of the petal is they all come to a little point. So to shape the base of the flower, I'm taking the smaller loop tool and I'm scooping from the outside to the like bottom edge of each petal, and you can see how they bend backwards, and they kind of shape into like a cup. And then in the middle, I'm going to take my medium ball stylus and I'm going to just push in a circle. Susan calls this stirring the pot. So I'm just pushing down in the center, and you can see how the whole thing kind of cups upwards. And I'm going to just add a little bit of extra shading because it kind of lost some of it there. And so the petals sort of bend out from how you shaped them originally, and then when you push the center down, it makes that cupped effect. And then for this, the petals, each individual petal that we're going to add to the flower, you do the same thing, but on the front. So you're taking the loop tool down and shaping it, and then grab it with the tweezers. And so, okay, let's start over. Scoop down, pinch it with the tweezers, fold it up, and then roll the outer petals back. So it's like the leaf, except instead of using the ball stylus, I'm rolling it towards the outside with the little leaf tool. I hold it with the tweezers and then roll it around the leaf tool. And then on the stamen piece, I've cut this out of some Gina K Designs wild dandelion, and then you just cut the little stamen ends in half to make it really like frayed and frilly with the Elizabeth Craft Designs super skinny tweezer or scissors. And then this is the bud, the peony bud that comes as part of this die set. There are three leaves there, and so I'm adding additional shading with the PanPastels. That's the base of the bud, and you can tell because it will be embossed after you die cut it. And that you just shape on the back side, so scoop down with the loop tool, and then the little petals you scoop on the front side. Again, fold in half, pinch it up. We'll like sort of pinch it with the tweezers and fold it, and then shape the outer petals around the leaf tool to kind of bend them back in a rolled shape. So to adhere this all together, I'm going to use the Beacon Kids Choice Glue, which is the only glue I would ever use for these kinds of flowers. It's amazing. It dries clear. You can't even see it. Like once it's dry, it's crazy. I don't know what it's made out of, but it works like a charm. Like I don't know. It's really cool. So I'm using it on the back of one of the stems, and I'm just adhering the stem down to the wreath. And then I'm going to dip the sort of cupped portion of the peony base and then spread the glue around the base of that, not on the petals. And then on the back of the bud, I'm just dipping that into the glue, and I'm placing that right in between the sort of like V stem there, you see. And often like the tweezers or the small ball stylus helps to like kind of press things in place and get the glue to really grip. And it grips pretty quickly. And so now I'm going to put petals around the first layer of petals around the inside of the peony. So I'm basically dipping the end of the petal into the glue and then covering sort of the spaces in between the petals on the base piece. Hopefully that makes sense and you can tell what I'm talking about. So it kind of offsets there's the petals on the first layer of the base piece, and then you're going to offset the petals on the second layer just by going around and adding them next to each other, and they kind of overlap, etc. And then this is now the first layer is done after the base piece, and I'm going to add the stamen. So I added glue all along that connector piece, and now I've grabbed it with the tweezers on the end, and I'm twisting it up, and then I'm just going to hold it together for a little bit until it grips, which doesn't take too long. Then I'm going to spread the little stamens out. I'm going to dip that in glue, the top of it, and then I'm going to dip this into yellow pollen. So this is some stuff that Elizabeth Craft Designs carries, and they have it in different colors, and it is super realistic looking. And then you just take the bottom of the stamen, dip that in glue, and then set that into the center of the peony. That pollen stuff really, it's really funky. Like if I didn't know it was fake, I would think it was real. Anyway, so now I'm going to complete the rest of the flower by just layering additional petals around and around and around, kind of in a circle, and some will stick up more, some will kind of cup up, some will go underneath. It just the shaping of them adds to the realism. And then on the front of the bud, I'm going to add the 2 additional like tiny bud petals and just have them meet together in the center of that green stem. And look at how cute that is, like super realistic looking and really simple. So now I've added a lot more petals to the peony with the glue, and I'm just adding in a few last ones. And I used several of the like tiny leaves from the bud die, although it's all one piece when you cut the petals. But like I sort of used a lot smaller petals as I went towards the middle, and that's the completed peony. Now for the dogwood, I've die cut the petals here from 85 pound white soft finish cardstock, and I'm taking my R59 Copic marker, which is like a deep red, and I'm just pressing it into like the little indent in the petals on either end to give it a little bit of a red highlight, as white dogwoods have. And then this is true green cardstock that I've used for the leaves, and I'm taking my Pine Needles Distress ink, and I'm doing the same thing I did on the peony leaves. I'm just kind of rubbing it along the edges of the leaves to add some dimension. And then on the centers of the white petals, I'm adding the green PanPastel, just as a little bit of a highlight in the center, as dogwoods have. And then to shape them, I'm going to take my small loop tool and press from the outside to the inside, so wide edge towards the V on each side, and then I'm doing the same thing as the peony petal. So I'm gripping it with the tweezers in the center of the petal, bending it up, and then rolling the outer leaves back over the leaf tool. And then you take the tiny ball stylus, press in the center, and it sort of cups up into a U shape. So your loop tool goes on the front side from the outside to the inside, pushing down, bend it in half around the tweezers, and then roll the outer petals back around the leaf tool or the tweezers if you're that coordinated. I'm not. And then the small ball stylus presses in the middle to cup up the two petals, and you do that on all the petals. So to adhere these in place, I'm again using the Kids Choice glue, and I'm going to dip the center of the like sort of U-shaped petals in the glue and set it onto the wreath where I need it. Then take the second set of petals, again dip the center in the glue, and then place that on a 90-degree angle on top of the first two petals, so you get that four-leaf clover kind of shape. And I find it's really, really helpful to have the small ball stylus handy, because like that can help get the two pieces to stick together really nicely. So here's a little bit of a difficulty I have getting them to like kind of look correct. So take the small ball stylus, press it in the center, and that just kind of sticks them together magically. It gets the glue to grip really nicely, and they just hold in place, and you just let that dry. And then for the stamen, you cut off half of the connector piece, so it's like going to be shorter. Run glue all down the connector piece, just like we did for the peony one. I'm going to take the tweezers and grab the sort of little handled end there and twist it to roll the whole thing up, and then hold it in place. Now this is not really a stamen, this is actually a braxton. And so you don't want to spread it too much because it's a little more chunky than an actual stamen. And so I'm going to dip the base into glue and stick that in the center of the dogwood. A really cool thing to add to these bracts is some prills if you have them on the ends. So I didn't, but if you have them, that's a really fun thing to do, just like we did the pollen on the peony. Now the leaves are exactly the same as the peony leaves, just slightly different shape. So you're going to draw the stem up the back, highlight it with the PanPastels, draw the additional veins on from the front with the leaf tool, and then pinch it with the tweezers, and then shape it on the back side with the medium ball stylus. And you just do the exact same thing for all of those. And now my last major element is the leafy berry branch, which I've cut out of 85 pound white soft finish cardstock, and I'm going to color it with my Spectrum Noir markers. So I'm using my BG6 as the stem color, the base stem color. This die is really nicely embossed, so you can really tell, like after you've cut it, where like the berries are, if they overlap the branch, and like the leaves have the veins embossed on them. So it's pretty easy to color. I'm coloring the leaves with my DG3 marker. And then I'm going to add some shading to the branch, just a little bit here and there, with my BG8 marker, which is this guy here. And I did this out of white and colored it because I'm going to use my Nuvo drops to color the berries. So this is JG6 for the center of my leaves. And so the Nuvo drops look a lot better on white cardstock than they do over colored cardstock. I've learned that the hard way. So that's why I did this with markers. So this is my dandelion yellow Nuvo drops that I've gone over all the berries. And now while it's still wet, I'm adding a tiny little drop of ripened pumpkin Nuvo drops to each one, and it kind of melds together and creates kind of a cool little effect. And I set that aside to dry. Now my sentiment is Happy Easter from the Spring Sentiment stamp set from Elizabeth Craft Designs. I'm stamping this on some white cardstock using Ranger's Lavender Field ink. It was a good match for my purple cardstock. And now you can see I've fit all my leaves in around where I need them, and I added an extra peony bud. And so now I'm just taking the leaves out, and I'm going to just dip the end, kind of like on the front and the back of the end, in glue, and feed them back under the flowers. With the petals, I only do the back side in the glue. On the leaves, I do the front and the back side of the end. So you get it kind of like stuck on both the top and the bottom as it's underneath the flowers. I added the rest of the glue to the back of the sentiment, and I'm just adhering that in the center, and I did die cut that out with the Stitch Circles die set. So my leafy berry branch is dry now. I've added berries on both sides, and I'm just going to cut it apart into much shorter segments because I want to kind of, I don't know, add little berries here and there all around the wreath to add some interesting texture and a little bit of interesting, a scale difference to make it more visually interesting. So I do kind of chop these down into small pieces, so you don't really need more than one branch yet. So I've got them all placed kind of where I want them now, and I will adhere them down the same way I did the leaves. So I just dip the ends in glue and feed them in place. I've added an organza bow with some glue dots to the upper right. This is the card base, which is 5.5 by 5.5, and I'm adhering this down with 10mm adhesive tape to the back side of the card front, because the card front's a little bit bigger at 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. And I've got one more leaf to add back in there because I didn't get it glued all the way. I did add one additional dogwood on the lower right there, as you can see, to kind of balance out the composition. And you can see how it's dimensional, but it's not like super dimensional. But I liked the really sort of bright and springy color palette, and I just love these flowers. I'm kind of obsessed. They're a lot easier to make than what you would suspect, and so I hope I have inspired you to at least give one of them a try. The dogwood especially is pretty easy to do. So thanks so much for watching and sticking with me for this long video. There were a lot of steps, but it's ultimately not too tough to put together. Here, supplies are linked in the video description and over my blog. There are 2 more projects here that I've done using Susan's Garden and Garden Notes dies in the past, so check those out. And if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would love it if you do that as well. Thank you so much and have an amazing day.